Hi, and welcome back to This Week in Voice, Season 7, Episode 3. My name is Bradley McIlrath. I'm CEO of Project Voice. Today, we've got a great panel. We're going to get to that in just a second. We were scheduled to be doing the Voice of Healthcare Summit in Boston today, which has been at Harvard Medical School for years. They closed that event venue during the pandemic to everyone and everybody. So we were going to do it at Northeastern. Northeastern decided to have some bomb threats. So we canceled the event, and we are not doing it virtually. We're not doing anything else virtually other than this show. We're back to in person where we can, just because that's where the value's at. So everybody knows that who was scheduled to attend the event, but nevertheless, thinking about the people of Boston, thinking about the people in Florida also today. With the hurricane. So thought I would address that to start the show. So we've got a great panel. We're really excited about who we've got on the show from all over the place. Timo, I'm going to start with you. Tell us who you are. Tell us about Aflorithmic.
Great. Thank you so much for having me, Brad. My name is Timo Kunz. I'm one of 3 founders of Aflorithmic. So Aflorithmic has been going for 3.5 years. We are actually London-based with an office in Barcelona. What we've done, we've actually created a AI infrastructure that pretty much emulates the entire production process that we would normally get out of a studio. So actually, we make it very easy to go from text, not only to speech, but then pretty much whatever else you would do in a studio, whether it being jingles at the front, background music, mixing, mastering, and so on and so forth. And we make it still very easy to put it somewhere where then you need it, whether that's being a audio ad or a podcast or anything. And all of this in an API first approach. So pretty much developers are invited to build with us, and we do very ambitious enterprise projects in the voice and audio space with that. That's me.
Thank you for joining us. Really interesting company. Yeah, appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks.
So next up is Chris Ezekiel of Creative Virtual. Chris, say hello.
Hi. Thanks, and thanks for inviting us, Bradley. Very nice to be here and talking about these stories today. So I'm Chris Ezekiel. I'm the founder and CEO of Creative Virtual. We've been going nearly 19 years in the space of virtual assistants, chatbots, conversational AI. Those terms have changed over the years. And we specialize in 2 areas, really. One is the experience that we bring to help companies deliver these solutions, these automated natural language processing conversational systems for large enterprises. And so that's the big thing that we do. Lots of experience of doing these over that many years, of course. But we also have a great tool set on the back end, the technology to help companies implement these solutions and make them successful. So all of the content management, knowledge management, all of the integrations with the back-end systems that need to be done, and all of the personalizations, etc. So that's us. I guess the companies we work with are large enterprises, as I said, so big banks, big telco companies. And I guess if you want to think about us as an organization, what we really help is provide that kind of boutique type experience for those large organizations to help them really customize these conversations and focus them on business outcomes and make them successful.
Excellent. Thank you for joining us today. Last but not least, Sean McIlrath of Artificial Solutions. Sean, tell us about you. Tell us who Artificial Solutions is.
Sure. Sean McIlrath. I've been in this industry for, probably about 12 years, just in terms of conversational AI and the automation space in general. Built a very large business here in the US prior, and now I'm here to help Artificial Solutions in our next generation. We've been in business for 20 years, have a lot of IP. Recently, over the last 2 years, we've shifted to a fully SaaS model where no black box, no delivery on our side, just allowing people to have the tools to really build something consistently and hardwiring that to the value of Azure to unlock it. So really now Teneo, which is our platform, is more of a brain where folks can kind of choose their pieces and parts of technology, but the digital agent aspect itself still can operate at scale and keep the guardrails online there for them to achieve the outcomes that they're looking for. Many of the largest telcos in the world and some of the most unique retailers that are out there are using our products at very massive scale to the tune of, tens of millions per month.
That's great. Thank you as well for being part of the show, and thanks to all 3 of you. really interesting work across the board. So we're honored to have you join us. And with that, we're going to get to the news. And story number one, I'm going to read this out loud from the New York Post. Siri, Alexa, and Google Home make children rude and antisocial, according to a study. So this was all over the place. This just came out yesterday. I think I had a gazillion, and that's a technical term, a gazillion people email me this. So figured it'd be a good thing to discuss here on the show. And Sean, I'm going to start with you, and then Timo, and you, Chris, and we'll rotate through as we go along. Sean, this is interesting. It's controversial, interesting headline. What stood out to you, and what are your thoughts about this piece?
I mean, frankly, it hit home. Between my fiance and I, we have 5 children that are all younger, and kind of ranging from 8 to 11. And I think it's absolutely accurate. Like if you kind of make a comment that, say, my fiance and I, like, you feel like, oh my gosh, like didn't get it right, or especially like with Siri and stuff like that. Sometimes when you're doing speech to text, like in the car, they kind of pick up on that and absolutely start sort of saying, oh, like this is dumb, or didn't get it right, or have different expectations for it. And we might think that we're sort of joking around with it, but to them, they don't really know any different. Like, because I think it's a little bit more tongue in cheek for us, because I try to explain to my kids. Of course, they don't understand. I'm like, we didn't have mobile phones, when I grew up. Like it was just like run out in the street and play and be home by dinner time. We didn't have all this all the technology basically to communicate there. So like it's what's funny to us, because we know that we have this luxury now. To them, this is just how life is. And yeah, they kind of just start beating up the virtual agents or the different systems that are out there for any shortcomings they have.
It's interesting, isn't it? It's interesting to think about. And Timo, I'm going to turn to you. You heard Sean has numerous children. Interesting insight on that. Your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a funny one actually. The first thing I had to think of. So we have a demo on our website, and of course it's a text box, and you can put anything in there and you want to, and it's very telling, like where people's thoughts go with this. So of course we log all the entries, and of course the majority is not safe for work, and I think the way like sitting in front of a screen, or pretty much having a computer or a robot or a voice assistant in front of you, like really decouples everything from like normal behavior that you would expose if someone is around. And I think this is kind of like what this article pretty much touches on. And I think it's always very surprising how fast we adapt our behavior when a new technology comes in. So I think the pandemic has been the best proof point for that. So we see how like Zoom actually changed every etiquette that we knew before. Right? So before the pandemic, it was very much unacceptable to show the background of your house, or to have children running in the background. And also like the way we interact with Zoom, we we deal with literally everything that is communication. And you could actually go on point to Twitter, how Twitter and how email etiquette has changed in very, very rapid ways. And yeah, I think there's the same here, right? So I think children used to be socialized with mainly humans in front of them, and it was very important to follow a certain etiquette. All of a sudden you put a robot in front of them, and that requires pretty much let's say new structures for them to learn certain things, right? And also I think what adds on top of this, none of these examples that I mentioned before are particularly human. However, now actually, these voice assistants are very much modeled on human interaction, and of course now that's entirely decoupled from the face that you normally see in front of you. So I think that's a new challenge that we need to live with, and pretty much that I am sure rapidly will find solutions for. But it's a very interesting one, yes.
No, that's great. Yeah, no, I think that's interesting just to point out, I mean, the pandemic changed so much, and you're right. It definitely illustrates to us, if we didn't know already, how quickly we're capable of change. Chris, I'm going to give you the last word on this. Actually, we'll open it up for conversation after this, but I want to go to you. You've heard two different thoughts that are pretty aligned on this. I want to hear yours. What do you think?
Yeah, I think as humans, as we've evolved, I mean, this technology is relatively recent in human history, of course. And I just wonder what that's going to do to the way we interact, because so much of what we do is based on emotion and facial expressions. And like we're on now, you can't pick up all of that with these 2D modes of communicating. And I've got a 15-month-old son. In fact, he's 15 months today, actually. So I do fear for that lack of human interaction, which the article human interaction, which the article touches on. And so I do think there are serious consequences. I think like all things in life, though, it needs to be a balance. These technologies do have their use. We can communicate quicker, more globally, without having to jump on airplanes. So they've definitely got a use. But I just think that we have to, as parents, as a society, have a balanced approach and make sure that our kids are, going to the play group still and pushing each other over and, doing all those human things that are still so very much important. But the other thing I'd like to pick up on is, like, some of these articles, some of these new things are not really that new. I mean, what's new is that they are becoming more mainstream, of course, but, being in the chatbot conversational AI space for so many years, we've seen people build relationships with technology all through those years. People do, even when they don't know they're real. Sorry, not real, I should say. They still build relationships with them. There is that need. And, I think the article talks about this, supporting people that may be lonely as well. So it does have a role to play, a serious role to play there for people like that. But I do think there's wider issues than just things like Siri and Amazon. And, I think increasingly AI systems and computer systems in general are behind human interactions and decisions. I mean, I just recently, last week, came back from a trip, and I just tell this tale quickly because it's one of the worst cases or best examples, worst cases of the computer says no that I've ever experienced. And that was, there'd been a human error. You get to the check-in, the gate ready for the departure of your aeroplane. You're reassured because you can see the aeroplane there, but there's a bit of commotion around the staff at the gate. And I quickly find out that what's happened is that there was a human error back in a contact center somewhere where, or the back office somewhere, and a person had accidentally deleted the wrong flight from the system that had been cancelled. So we was all no longer checked in to fly on the plane. And but for some strange reason, one person was. And for about half an hour, they were really going to let this plane fly from Amsterdam to London with one person on board, because the computer said no, it wouldn't allow the check-in of the passengers that had already checked in. I mean, absolutely incredible. But it just brings it home to me, when we talk about computers taking over the world and AI being the solution to that, or whatever, or the problem for that. I think in some cases, when I find examples like that, I think in some cases, that they already have, because behind most humans today is a computer telling them what to do in those situations. And I fear for that world as well.
No, yeah, that is a good story. So I have a 10-year-old who will be 11 in a few weeks, and my wife and I will tell him to go to Alexa for confirmation that Augusta is the capital of Georgia, or 2 times 38 is indeed 76, or whatever. And it's not my perception that he's rude to the device, but this article kind of makes me wonder how much or how little I'm paying attention to that. I think it's kind of interesting. So from that standpoint, I think it's good just to sort of get our antennas up and sort of do a check on how we're all interacting with these devices. It's the other thing that I sort of wonder is, there's correlation and causation, right? I mean, do children who are antisocial and already have a predisposition to be rude, do they gravitate to these devices because they are that way, or do these devices have a feedback loop that makes them more that way? The article just kind of drops this concept on us, and it really doesn't dive in. I haven't read the paper that's behind it. This just came out yesterday. But nevertheless, these are all, I think, helpful things to kind of be thinking about. Any closing thoughts on this one before we move on?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, Sean, please.
I was just going to say that, I mean, from my perspective, I don't know, like at least my kids, I don't see them being antisocial with it. I just think it, when I look at those types of assistants, I kind of worry more about, like, are they, not learning to read as well as they could, or learning to write as well as they could, because they're using speech to text, when they do searches and things like that. But I don't know. I don't really see the antisocial part of it. I don't think they're having conversations. Like, these are still like very task oriented, point in time type requests. It's not like they've got, a robot friend or something like that they're talking to.
And just from my side, and Brett, I think this gives you probably the perfect segue to the next article in the list. I think it can go both ways. And I am old enough now to remember the Tamagotchi craze, which is now already a long time ago. But I think that was the first time where really, people became excessively emotionally attached to pretty much their little robot in their pocket. And I think in the future, if I think about robotics especially, I think companionship actually, and pretty much replacing social interactions with whether it being just pure voice, or where I would really bet on is pretty much in the robotic space, that companionship is gonna be one key application of robotics, and also pretty much the other extreme, that actually people will become emotionally attached, or pretty much let's say improve their social life rather than have it deteriorate, or their how the article words it here, in their I don't know, their social skills, manners, whatever you want to put it. I think that will happen as well. And we've actually also seen it plenty of times where actually people are, let's say, overly or unreasonably emotional about, like, pretty much the attachment they have towards a piece of audio, or pretty much how they interact with a speaker. So, for example, just one example, I know. I've heard people say that actually they interact at the end of the day. They interact with their voice agent, with their voice application, just to hear someone's voice and pretty much not wish them a good night, but pretty much hear something, a personal message at the end of the day. So I think it will very much go both ways.
Yeah. And I think we shouldn't forget that these do have a service to provide. I mean, there are these fears, of course. And as I said, when I made my first comments about this, that I think it is a balance. We've got to treat those, or teach our children and the next generation those life skills. And that includes interacting with other people and reading, writing, all the things that we've spoken about. But I also find that people, especially, maybe vulnerable people, and it may apply to children that, have anger to get off their chest, through that to a computer or a device better than another child. But also when I see the interactions that go on with some of our chatbots, conversational AI systems, with banks, people sometimes are more willing to talk about their vulnerabilities, their problems with debt, for example, to a machine than they are another human. So there is that support, and you touched on it, Tim, the companionship bit. And, I do think we have to kind of recognize that too. But, getting that balance right for me is really the key thing.
I think for what Chris is saying too, I've seen the same thing, especially from an adult perspective, and sort of those like debt or those types of situations, maybe medical or healthcare type, you can be more honest, right? Like where in those questions, but, kind of from this perspective, like on the children's side, I guess for what I would say is like, I mean, I would, like, me personally, like, I wouldn't, my kids are going to get older now, so like, I'm not worried about it, but I think that's just like, you're not giving your 5-year-old necessarily a mobile phone. or smartphone to basically play with, or letting them have unfettered access to an iPad. So with these types of companions or robot companions in the future, I don't think I would actually get one for my child. I'd just stick with a puppy, and let them play with that. And for me, I don't have Alexa around the house for the kids either. I think they can get off the couch and turn something on.
And Sean, just to clarify, did you say you had 5 children from the ages of 8 to 11?
Yep. Between my fiance and I. So
we'll say a prayer for you in between stories.
It's good. It's good. It's good. We've got a little wolf pack.
There you go. No, I am continually fascinated by, I'll say this and then we'll move on, because you're right, the next story does have a connection to this. I'm fascinated by the number of people in this space who either don't have voice assistants in the home or who limit them sharply for children. There's an episode we did, I'd have to go back and look at what season it was. I want to say it's season 2, where we had Kesha Williams on, who was one of the first Alexa champions we had on the show, and she's a well-known evangelist in the space, and she's a minority woman. And she said, "Oh yeah, I'm a Alexa champion, but no, I have my children unplug." She said she has them unplug the devices every night as some sort of ritual. And I just thought that was very eye-opening. And this is more of a continuation of that, where there's this unease. It's not settled in any way, how our children ought to be interacting with this. And this is with a group of technologists on this show this week and every other week. And so that, I think that's the largest, that kind of speaks loudly without even hearing all the great comments that y'all made. We will move on. Story number 2, and I'm going to read this out loud. Here are the new features Amazon is adding to Alexa, and could have taken this from anywhere, took it from Engadget, thanks to them. So I guess my question is, and Timo, we'll start with you, Chris, and then you, Sean, for this one. What stood out? Amazon does these events. I just find it funny. They don't even have a name. They just call it an Amazon event. People do pay a lot of attention to these. I'm wondering, first of all, how much attention do you pay? And did anything stand out here? Do you care? Do you not care about this? Tell me how this article struck you.
Yeah, I think you just get into a habit, don't you? You put one of these in your home. We do have one. It's the Echo Show version, and we just get used to playing a bit of music on it, adding things to the shopping list. I heard in one of your other broadcasts, productions, Bradley, someone talking about, while you're cooking and you've got messy hands. It's great device for that. I mean, getting back to that, kind of trust thing as well. I mean, I remember buying my mum one when they first came out, and she sort of loved it for playing some music and checking the weather and things like that. Became a bit of a gimmick for her at first, but then she heard and read some article about it listening into conversation. She unplugged it. She never plugged it in since. So, so I think I do think it depends. I mean, I'm not so keen. I know the article talked about shopping for clothes, and I'm not sure about that. I think there's some things that we just need to go into stores to do. Otherwise we'll just be in that mode of ordering 10 things of 10 different items and sending 95% of them back. And I don't know, I just don't buy into that use case too much. I think we get these things, we use them, we don't pay. I know at my home we don't pay much attention to the new stuff that's going on them. We find some niche areas where we like using them, and that's about it.
No, that's great. And Timo, I'll go to you, and then Sean, I'll go to you for this. Anything stand out? Do you care about this? Hit me with your thoughts and how this struck you.
Yeah, for me, the big and interesting item in the article, BMW pretty much doubles down on tightening the partnership with Amazon. So I'm super interested in what's going on in CarOS, like much more actually than I'm interested in whether Alexa lets you buy clothes now and anything else. So I think that's a fascinating area at the moment, and in the next few years, I think there will be a massive shift in how we actually look at cars. Of course, I mean, everybody's been talking about self-driving cars now for way too long, and I don't want to get into that. But I think what's totally undebated is that cars are going to go the same way that pretty much virtually all other equipment went in the past years. It's going to be a piece of hardware with a lot of software on it, and not the other way around. And I've been very curious, like whether the car manufacturers are going to avoid the many mistakes that, for example, the computer and of course the mobile phone industry has gone through, and pretty much having their cake eaten by pretty much software vendors coming in. So I was actually extremely skeptical on whether I mean, Google has a car OS, of course, and to what level actually car manufacturers are open to integrate these tools. And now that BMW pretty much gives more from their software in their cars away to Amazon, which I feel will be very much at the core of their value creation in the future. I think that's very surprising for me, actually, that Amazon is successful with that. And, yeah, I'm watching that space closely. It's a fascinating a field to watch in the next few years.
And Sean, I want to turn to you. Have a sense of how you'd answer this on a personal level from the previous, story, but on a professional level, do you pay attention to stories like this? Is there anything that stood out to you? Hit me with your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I'm here in Austin, right? So Tesla and Elon Musk are around here, so we get quite a bit in terms of like what's happening. I'm with Timo. I think it's crazy that they're going to allow Amazon to kind of front end their data. I wouldn't be doing that if I was them. Like, I just think that's an extremely valuable asset for them to mine, and they're enabling, a partner, obviously, in this case, but that's going to be something that I think, is going to set them apart. I'm sure Chris would agree too. Like, when you look at like just the experience and what they have that's relative to them, like, I think you kind of always look at these sort of digital agent solutions, which this one's a little bit more probabilistic versus, doing a job, which I think is kind of like what Chris was explaining prior, where there's a defined parameter for it. Yeah, I just wouldn't, I wouldn't want to share that data.
I think so dangerous. And you've got the Apple, Google, Amazon, these ecosystems. And I think the thing that gets lost, a couple of things that I think get lost in the conversation, when we look at the car, I mean, the car's a great use case, of course, for voice, absolutely. And I think very interesting. But these ecosystems, are growing, and I think we lose, the word that gets lost is interoperability, between those different systems, and what that means, and what about the people that can't afford to buy into one of those ecosystems. I know there's some really interesting stuff going on with kind of cheaper solutions to these smart speaker systems. I think it's the McIlrath AI as a good example of that, where it's kind of much more open source. So obviously there's a lot to play out there, but yeah, those ecosystems in the interoperability of them, I think it's going to be a key point moving forward on those as well.
I'm curious to hear all three of y'all before we get off of this story. So, at the heart of this, it was interesting to hear your comments, all three of y'all, on this. But from a business point of view, here's a company having their own event to show you their own news. And a lot of companies do this, of course, almost every, plenty of companies do this, some big, some small. Is anybody paying attention to this? I think 5 years ago, the first time Amazon did an event, it was in the fall. It was when the original Echo Show got rolled out, if I'm not mistaken. They had Echo buttons and a bunch of stuff, and it sort of became a tradition. And this was a different kind of thing that they did yesterday, a little bit more broad-based. But there's such a battle for attention because we're still, in-person's coming back, but we're all behind a computer screen day in, day out. There's a battle for everybody's attention constantly. Do people pay attention to companies stepping to the mic and issuing forth their own propaganda? I mean, I just I like some of the updates, but I just don't think there's a lot of mileage with all of this. Any comments on that?
I mean, I don't know from my perspective, like how many folks really like engage in it, but I mean, it's certainly, newsworthy and cool. I think that you've got your partners like BMW and Disney that are clearly involved in that sort of, PR and the media aspect of things and signing off and what they want to get out of it. But I mean, I just go back to, BMW as a brand. Like, I don't know if do I really want the brand that's in theory everybody's house in a BMW? Like, do I want the BMW experience?
Yeah. But I think Tim, you might have touched on this earlier about the again, it comes down to interoperability, doesn't it, between the hardware and the software companies, really, taking over it. And I think, to me, it struck when I was reading this, I couldn't stop thinking about, well, the fear factor of like Apple potentially producing its own car hardware with all of its slick software going on there. And I think you'll see more of these moves where you've got data, software, manufacturing coming together because they know that's going to come down the line soon. Those companies that are going to produce the whole shebang, just like it did with the smartphone, and as we were touching on earlier, what's happened with the likes of Nokia and companies like that. It's very interesting, I think. But to your point, I mean, I felt the same. I thought, it seems a bit of a strange relationship there to go down.
And then I think there's a third component to it. So as Sean said, it's pretty much you're giving away the data, which is a massive strategic disadvantage, of course. Then I think the point you're touching on is pretty much you encourage everybody from Apple to Amazon once they really much got the software part figured out. Well, now let's do the easy part and put some hardware around it, and boom, there's the next iPhone in car form, right? However, I think there's also another component is I think that you're also totally losing the opportunity to make this pretty much the standout feature, or pretty much turning this into a competitive advantage, right? I mean, we're already I think at a point where you choose your car no longer whether in terms of some parameter in the info leaflet, but actually you like it because it feels right and you can connect your Spotify to it, right? And there's a nice place for your phone, and it just feels good, and I don't know, the cup holder is in the right place. So I think exactly, I think BMW or a company of the size of BMW, you can say what you want about old school car companies, but they totally have the opportunity to outperform with their knowledge to outperform Google, Amazon, Apple, and so on and so forth, of building something super tailored to the car and creating, using the voice assistant part and the software in the car to really create like the next level outstanding experience that you can have in a car. Yeah? And I think this is probably, for me, that's even worse. It's actually you give up that opportunity to create a massive competitive advantage for yourself and retreat to pretty much putting up a piece of hardware that everybody at the end of the day will be able to copy.
Yeah, I think the surprising bit for me was they built one of the use cases in the article was about calling the breakdown services. I mean, how easy is that to do? Is that a revolutionary? I mean, maybe what's interesting is what Apple are doing with crash detection in their latest watches and phones. But anyway, that's an obviously great use case. But I mean, calling the breakdown services using voice, I'm not sure is going to be the killer app for that.
Yeah, and I think just to kind of make sure we parse it out a little bit, like for me, like I don't have a problem with say like a map application, Google Maps or whatever map application you have. And so that sometimes gets jumbled together, but like the experience that I'm driving a BMW, how this BMW operates, like what I'm going to do in the BMW and all those native type things that are related directly to the car. Like, yeah, like I think that Timo's kind of nail on the head. They should be looking at giving a specific experience inside that car. Again, maps or some sort of other general application that is pretty standardized at that point, choose what you want. But at the end of the day, what we're really talking about too, for the most part, is that you've got some basic triggers for an action and mostly search function and kind of some probabilistic stuff. Like it's not. So I mean, I think they could easily replace it in the future should they want to give that expectation there. I mean, if you've got an iPhone or whatever, you can just talk to Siri, it can do the same stuff for the most part. But yeah, I would just like in other situations, I would like to have a very designed experience for me that I'm getting, especially in a luxury car, from BMW, not from Amazon.
We know how much customer experience is the differentiator today for organizations, and it's handing over that customer experience of your car to someone else to that effect. So yeah.
We'll leave the story there. Yeah, interesting comments, and appreciate the conversation on that. I'll actually just drop that right there and let that let all three have the last word combined on that. I want to move on to this third story because there's a lot of meat on the bones. I'm going to read this. It's from something called the European Business Review. Conversational AI is asking for ethical oversight. How can humans best answer the call? So there's a lot of meat on the bones with this, and I like to include stories like this that kind of have a lot of surface area to them, and sort of see what stands out. And Sean, I'm going to start with you on this, and then Chris, go to you, and then Timo, I'll close with you on this particular story. There's a lot of words in this article. What stood out to you the most with this piece?
I think for me, it's sometimes hard to get my head wrapped around, kind of what we're talking about here. Like it's just almost like what I call it kind of cloudifying something, that we're just grouping everything in like conversational AI. I mean, I look at most of this stuff that's basically not a defined outcome, like as I was just saying, is some sort of search or probabilistic type thing that's going there that I'm trying to just trigger something almost like an IVR. It just happens to be coming in a different form, on that. Like when I think about conversational AI, I think about a really deterministic outcome and experience that isn't going to be, it's going to be designed really to give somebody that consistent, every time, solve the need, be refined, ensure that we're getting to, solve that end user's issue in a conversational way that understands context and those types of things. So when I look at this, like, I don't know, like I think it's a very wide definition to the types of things that are out there, like where there's probably hundreds of different solutions. Conversational AI to me is just, it's going to be more deterministic than probabilistic. This is more like about search.
In your mind, before I go to Chris, I'm going to ask him the same question. I'm sure I'll ask Timo the same question too. What is responsible AI? So responsible AI is in a phrase that's used in the summary of this piece. In your mind and in what you do every day with artificial solutions, what is the definition of responsible AI?
Yeah, I mean, I think from a market perspective more so, because like, again, for us, it's going to be deterministic and we're making sure it's not self-learning, and, there's going to be some approval process, like from, a human perspective. So like when you get into these sort of search-based things, that the algorithms, like I think is sort of the key, that, you've got to have some boundaries set up in terms of like what it's actually producing. But, in this situation, I think there's also a question of if it's performing functions, especially in a car, to the example we're just talking about right now, access has to be limited, in terms of what that system can actually touch or do.
Interesting. Yeah, that's great. Chris, I'm going to turn to you. A lot of meat on the bones with this particular piece.
Yeah,
it covers a lot of ground. What stood out to you?
Yeah, I've got lots to say about this, so I'll try and be brief. But of course, because this is an area that we're very much in and talk about all the time, a bit like Sean as well. And absolutely agree with Sean as well, is that, it's based on these, deterministic outcomes for businesses. And this term is so misused. I mean, self-proclaimed business experts. I've read one of these papers recently that talked about conversational AI being a list of these technologies and lists out the technologies. I mean, it's crazy. It's complete rubbish, of course, because it all comes down to, the experience that the person gets, the outcome that they get at the end of the day. But getting a bit specific, and especially about the ethics around this, I think you just need to be clear. What is the automated system and what is the system that's the human element in the conversation? And I think if you're clear about that, from the outset, you set the right expectations. So it's very clearly marked for our customers that you're talking to a chatbot or a conversational AI system. And if you hand over to a person, say through live chat, that delineation between those two is very clear. It's a very clear action. And I think that solves a lot of the issues that come up in this particular article. It's a little bit more nuanced than that, though, when you think about the agents, because we are now seeing agent assist solutions, so this is real people in contact centers, even on the telephone still, being prompted by these type of systems to give answers or next best actions, as they're so called. So, you know, again, kind of what I was saying earlier, we get caught up in the chatbot or the you know, the avatar bit of the representation, but humans are being prompted with these systems as they interact with people, even on a telephone. So I think there's that bit to it, which wasn't really covered in the article, but I think there's in our minds is that piece to it as well. But I think the key for us is you know, making that delineation clear, you know, who you're interacting with and why. And the AI piece, you know, I think is also a bit irrelevant in it. All of the conversations, the most sophisticated conversations that we create through our conversational AI system, as it's being termed these days, doesn't use the AI bit at all. You know, if you're going to, you know, make a payment or, you know, book a ticket, you know, whatever, you know, that's done in a conversational way. And I think the thing that gets missed is the bread and butter. You know, you need integration with the back-end CRM system, the knowledge systems within that organization to create an effective outcome, which is benefit to the person because they get served in a conversational way, benefit to the organization because they've been able to do that without, you know, using a person in a contact center to do that. And I think Sean's to the point, you know, these are repetitive tasks that you can automate in a conversational way. And quite often AI is not used in those conversations. In fact, AI gets in the way, because it you know, kind of overrides and tries to come up with, based on some probabilistic or, you know, kind of data model, its own response, and that gets in the way. AI does have a place to play, but you know, not so much in the conversational systems that we put in today. There's normally always a human in the loop, and it's a hybrid approach. You know, that's the term we use. And so, yeah, that's and I think the ethic bit goes away when you approach it that way, when you're not just relying on a black box or the machine learning component to come up with, you know, almost random and non-understandable from humans what's going on there.
No, that's interesting. And so you realize, and I think that there's some, you know, similarities with, I think you and Sean echoed a little bit of this, there's a little bit of Venn diagram intersection there, but you both made very interesting points. And isn't it interesting to think about how, you know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, ethics, you know, concerns or, you know, ethical questions orbited around exactly the opposite of what you're saying, using humans, including humans. When it was discovered that all these different large tech companies have humans involved, somehow that was associated with you know, ethical concerns, because people were caught by surprise by that, and now, like so many things, the pendulum's turned 180 degrees the other way. It's just kind of interesting to note. I agree with a lot that you said, and same thing for you, Sean. But Timo, I want to turn to you. Lot of meat on the bones with this particular article. A lot of words. What stood out to you?
Yeah, I felt the same way. I think it summarizes a lot of very, very broad questions, and yeah, covers many topics. I mean, when we get requests for either interviews, PR, anything, it feels like I think almost half of them want to discuss AI and ethic and AI. So there's clearly a topic, or there's clearly an appetite, a big appetite for the topic. I think in the article it's exactly that. So it covers like pretty much all uncertainties, all fears, or all concerns that somehow touch ethics and AI. I always have the impression a lot of the fears in that space actually have been there in the past in a different format. And let's just give you one example. So one of the services that we offer is voice cloning, and we have you actually we ask people for consent. So you need to actually read that when you record with us, you need to actually read that it's you and that you confirm that you want your voice cloned. And then also, of course, voice data is personal identifiable information, so we keep it as safe as we would keep your credit card information, and so on and so forth. Only you can access your voice, and so on and so forth. However, like the question that comes around a lot is kind of like, oh yeah, but with that new technology in the future, we cannot trust anymore what we hear. So if you then hear someone say this and this, you don't know if it's an AI or if it's anything like this. If it's the real deal. Up until, I want to say, a couple of decades ago, right, you could trust a picture. Like if you would see a photograph, you knew that this actually happened. Yeah, and then along came Photoshop and all the other tools, and all of a sudden you cannot trust this anymore. Yeah, and I think we've adapted very well to this, right? So if you actually see a cat shooting a gun, riding a dinosaur on a picture, you know that this didn't happen, that it might be or is probably probably Photoshop. And the reality will be that actually with everything that you set or pretty much what you see and video and pretty much also what's being said, you will not be able to trust that in the future. And that's just the reality. But we've dealt with that in the past. And I think a lot of these questions that we're touching at the moment with AI and ethics, they are driven a bit by concerns that we cannot deal with them, and that's something. It's an intimidating black box. I absolutely get that, and we need to keep the oversight of it, and that's a task we need to solve. However, as I said, I think it's a task that we solved in the past.
Well, the final story here, which I'm going to get to right now, I'm watching the clock and we want to keep us on time, dives into this. And I'm going to read the headline out loud. This is from The Sun. Darth Vader will be voiced by AI after star James Earl Jones signs over rights to iconic roles. So this sort of dovetails with some of the things we're talking about. There's definitely an ethical component to this. Timo, I'm going to start with you, and then Sean, I'm going to go to you, and then Chris, I'm going to give you the last word on this. Briefly, tell me, is this, I think I know how you're going to answer this, Timo, but I think I've got an inkling of that. But is this, first of all, this story was really confusingly written but we'll ignore that. Is this type of thing good? Brief answer, hit me with it. Timo, you first.
Yes, of course. And I'm glad you asked me first because it's my favorite story in the bunch. So Respeecher made the voice, fantastic company, fantastic technology. I saw next week you have Resemble AI on the show. They just released a similar speech-to-speech feature. I think it's great technology. And of course, you need to have the consent and the license to actually use that voice. However, we will see very cool speech-to-speech applications in the future.
So I heard a yes in that answer.
Absolutely.
Okay. Sean, I'm going to you. Interesting story. We're going to have synthetic voice people on every show. If the answer is no, you're going to offend not only the Timo, but a bunch of people before and after. So don't worry about that. Is this type of thing in this story a good thing or a bad thing? Your response.
I think it's totally cool. I mean, again, I think it's going to be more of a deterministic type thing. Like, I mean, probably this dumbs it down too much, but it's going to be like, Woody, like there's going to pull the string and there's a snake in my boot, like it's just going to know its basic interactions that it's probably going to have and be, somewhat repetitive on that. I don't think it's going to be self-learning. We're not going to have a Microsoft Tay type issue, that's out there. And I think it just goes back to the other point too, that, and Chris said on this, like, one, let's be real. Like there's no such thing as AI today, right? Like there's kind of insights, there's assistance, and then there's obviously some digital agents that are going to complete end-to-end tasks and maintain context in there that people would interchange in that. But at the end of the day, nothing's going to do anything that it doesn't have access to. All of these platforms, all of these systems, in order to do something different or to do something more than what they're designed, need to have access to those things to do it. Whether it be, security privileges or otherwise that are out there. So I think this will be super cool. And I think it'll be awesome for the kids.
Cool. And Chris, I'm giving you the last word on this. Is this type of thing in this story good or bad? Your take.
I think it's cool. I think it's always been cool, but it's not new. I mean, we were doing this 20 years ago. I mean, there was a company, I looked them up actually, because I kind of just remembered their name, and I looked up when they were purchased by Amazon, but it was a company called Ivona. And, we worked with them. It feels like 20 years ago. I look back, they were bought by Amazon in 2013. But when we were doing voice for our avatars were much more popular in the chatbot space back then. That they were doing young, old voices, regional. We had a Scottish one. One of our avatars needed to have a Scottish accent voice. We've had the GPS units talking about cars again, having voices that you can kind of plug in and of different people and famous people. So I think it's really cool. Also, being a Star Wars fan, I'm looking forward to my boy being old enough to, so I've got a good excuse to kind of watch them all again. But I mean, these are going to be in toys, aren't they? They're going to be interactive in toys and voice, not just one way, not just the text to speech, of course, the speech synthesization, but also the understanding of the intent but yeah, it's all based on that integration with the back end system to make it work. So the surprising thing for me is that I'm surprised it's really a news item now in a way, because this technology has been around for some time, and I guess it gets back to what Timo was saying. They've managed to strike a license deal. That's the new thing, isn't it? Really, in this article, they've managed to strike a license deal, with Disney, I guess, to create the voice and make that commercially available for Darth Vader.
Well, that's precisely it, isn't it? Is that this is I would love to have access to the deal that was done with some of these things, because so you've got James Earl Jones's voice and you got the rights to it. Okay, well, so if I have James Earl Jones, Darth Vader, talk about how great the Republican Party is, now are you going to come back and say something about that? Or if you have it talk about how there was no such thing as 9/11, or what about that? I would love to see how these deals are constructed from a content point of view, and just such an interesting time we live in. With all of this stuff, it's just challenging and it's fresh and it's fun to talk about. Gentlemen, thank you for taking the time. Timo, Sean, Chris, appreciate your time. Y'all are fantastic. Great comments. Thanks for making the time for This Week in Voice.
Yep.
Thank you much.
Thanks so much. Thanks.
For This Week in Voice, Season 7, Episode 3, thank you for watching. If you're watching on YouTube or listening, if you're on your podcast provider of choice, until next time.